Hey, good morning. Welcome to Sports Live, where we talk Chiefs with the experts on all things Kansas City Chiefs. Let's bring in the panel. Herbie Teope is here. Good morning, Herbie.
We're an expert now, huh?
Good morning, we're elevated status. Yeah, we're now experts. 4 games into the season, we should know something.
You would think.
You would think. Sam McDowell's here. How you doing, Sam?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Good to see you. And Vahe Gregorian has checked in. Hey, Vahe.
Hey, y'all. I remember a football coach saying an expert was somebody who used to be a drip.
Well, we would all qualify for that.
Used to be.
Hey, we're playing shorthanded today. Sam Mellinger will not be joining us today and has a conflict. So next time, Sam will be here, and we'll miss him today, but we'll carry on the best that we can. Let's start with first asking for your comments and questions. Please bring them, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. We got a lot of topics to cover today, but we're going to start where we always do, and that is with the injury report and how it will affect the Chiefs for Sunday's game against the Las Vegas Raiders. First of all, let's just say I'm not having as difficult a time remembering that the Raiders are in Las Vegas as I did that the Chargers are in Los Angeles and not San Diego. Are they the Vegas Raiders to you guys?
I keep writing Oakland Raiders, so I'm thankfully our editorial team keeps catching it. So I still have to get used to typing Las Vegas Raiders.
I think go ahead, Sam.
I was going to say, until we get the perk of actually going to Vegas as beat writers, then I can't call them Vegas yet.
Well, I know we had at least 2 guys on this call who were eager to be the advanced scouts for that and go out there for a week and stay out there for a week. And now you'd have to do it under quarantine. So I guess that's not going to happen. The reason I think I'm not having as much trouble, and now, of course, I'll type it wrong today, but is just because the loss and the sand, and there's only, Oakland, Las Vegas, not San Diego to Los Angeles. I don't know. It just seems to be an easier distinction with a number of words.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's part of it. Vegas Raiders seems to roll off the tongue better than Los Angeles Chargers. Vegas Raiders, and heck, the Raiders, no matter where they're playing, Oakland, LA, Las Vegas, they're going to have a following that they have a national following. And when the fans are allowed in the new stadium, what is it, Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, I think we're going to see the same sort of black hole fans that Sam McDowell got to know in a close-up personal way at the game in Oakland last year. So, all right, Herbie, let's start it off with injuries and the injury report. I guess there was only one Chiefs player who did not practice yesterday.
Yeah, the rookie defensive end Mike Dana did not, or Dana. I think, remember, it's not Dana.
Dana. It is absolutely Dana. It's Dana.
Suffered a hamstring injury against the Patriots, and he didn't practice. We'll see what he does today. I'm starting to sound like Andy Reid now. We'll see what he does today or Thursday. But the big one, obviously, is Chris Jones, who suffered a groin strain in Week 3 against the Baltimore Ravens, was limited leading up to the Patriots game, and then they made the decision not to have him play. He was limited on Wednesday. We asked Coach Andy Reid his comfort level, if they're going to be able to ramp him up this week and hopefully maybe see him return to action. He was limited on Wednesday, so to steal Coach Andy Reid's phrase, we'll see what he does on Thursday. But here's the thing. Even though he didn't play, Mike Pennell drew the start alongside Derek Nottie and recorded a career-high 10 tackles. And that's pretty darn impressive. So maybe they can afford to rest him up again because they're going to have a short week next week against, they play the Buffalo Bills. Maybe you want to rest him up again until that showdown with the still undefeated Buffalo Bills.
Scheduled to play the Buffalo Bills, and we'll get into that in a moment. So it is also the week that Bashard Breeland comes off a suspension, and what does that mean for the Chiefs?
Oh, it gives him an immediate starter if the Chiefs feel he's ready to play, because he's missed 4 games. There's going to be a lot of rust there. I don't know if they're going to have him start off and draw the snaps that he typically did like you saw in 2019. He finished the year with the 4th most defensive snaps. I don't know if you want to rush him onto the field, especially with the way the Raiders are banged up. They have 19 players on their injury report on Wednesday, including the 12th overall pick of the 2020 NFL Draft, Henry Ruggs. He hasn't played in 2 weeks because he's also dealing with a hamstring injury. So maybe you can afford to ease Breeland back in, but, we get Steve Spagnuolo this morning. We'll find out what their plan is.
Still playing, of course, without L'Jarius Sneed at cornerback. They do have, along with Rashard Fenton and Charvarius Ward, Antonio Hamilton and Bo Pete Keys. So it seems like depth-wise, they're okay at cornerback.
Oh, agreed. I think they're, especially when you consider the game that Rashad Fenton had against the Patriots. Turned in a monster game. 4 passes defense, an interception. I think it was 4 or 5 tackles, but he had a monster game where you should be able to feel comfortable, especially if Ruggs is not playing. So you can afford to maybe ease Breeland back in.
I know Ruggs practiced this week, or he's a limited practice participant for the Raiders. And of course, he was the number 12 overall draft pick. And was they made no bones about it. He's going to be their Tyreek Hill, speedy, undersized wide receiver. So Sam McDowell, I know you wrote about the secondary and the pass defense after the game on Monday against the Patriots. That has really emerged as a strength of this team.
Yeah, and surprisingly so, I think. I think during the offseason, that was one of the areas that we sort of looked at and wondered if they needed to add a body there, especially after the Bashaud Breeland suspension. It's not a position that you like to go into the season with a lot of youth. I mean, it's a tough spot to just be thrown into the fire at cornerback. But, I think that there's a few things at play there. I mean, obviously, you drafted well. You're not paying those guys much, so obviously you've acquired guys that are sort of diamonds in the rough, and obviously Steve Spagnuolo's system and has made it to where their safeties help out their corners more than I think what happened under the past defensive coordinator here.
Okay, let's go to some of the news of the week, and not all great news for the NFL and the Chiefs. More than at any time during the season, COVID-19 has been impacting the game. And this is from Roger Goodell, the commissioner, from a memo on Monday. Quote, protocol violations that result in a virus spread requiring adjustments to the schedule or otherwise impacting other teams will result in additional financial and competitive discipline, including the adjustment or loss of draft choices or even the forfeiture of a game. It looks like the NFL office is taking it seriously. We know they put out a protocol, about a 50-page protocol book in the right before the opening games. So the NFL has tried to clamp down and do all it can to prevent COVID-19 cases but more importantly the spread of COVID-19 if a player comes down with it. But since just in the last week, right, we had the Raiders charity party hosted by, I guess, Darren Waller was the key to that, and players were seen there without masks, and of course the workouts by the Tennessee Titans, a team that I think it's up to 24 positive test cases for the Titans, and they've already had to reschedule one game, and we're looking at maybe this weekend's game against the Buffalo Bills. I haven't seen any news on that yet. Of course, we're talking on Wednesday morning, but the Chiefs have been impacted by this as well. And we heard from Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid yesterday, among others, about this. Hey, Vahe, why don't you take us through what Patrick Mahomes said and how this is impacting the Chiefs?
Well, a couple different things on Patrick that are kind of interesting, right? I mean, first of all, we start with knowing he's the face of the Chiefs, the face of the NFL, and I think if he were to have one of these become positive, I think that would be the most momentous guy in the league right now. I can't think of anybody else more prominent. Cam Newton was prominent, but And then you got the added factor, of course, of Patrick's fiance, Brittany, being pregnant. So there's a very personal side to this too. And we have to go back a couple of days, right? So first of all, you have Jordan. Do you pronounce it Tamu? Am I saying it right?
Tamu.
Testing positive, and even though we know their distance and they do a lot of their meetings with Zoom, and he's on the practice squad, he's still a quarterback, and there's still some at least intermittent socially distant contact. So that led to Patrick saying he slept in another bedroom over the last few days until he got his negative test. And then, of course, he had the contact with Gilmore after the game on Monday, and that was very brief. And I think, what we still don't know about the virus, or we're still learning about the virus, is it's sort of like a running back who just needs a little crease, right, to get through. You just don't know if somebody's gonna pop right through, or if the more likely situation is you'd need the 15 minutes at close range with particles, et cetera. So all that's a really long-winded way of saying we've had reason to wonder whether Patrick might get it, and of course, reason to wonder whether any other Chiefs might get it with a player in their midst who had it. And all this stuff, Blair, to your kind of original point, it just makes you think about all these dots and how they connect, right? I mean, now we got a question about whether maybe the Titans will end up playing the Bills this weekend. And I guess if that goes off okay, they're doing it because they think it's safe. But then next up is, the Bills and Chiefs, and how do those things connect? Do they connect in any way? There's a really fine line here between anticipating the worst and not being vigilant. And I think that's the thing. That's the whole testament to these times.
Yeah, Herbie, from an NFL perspective, Roger Goodell obviously not happy with the news. And listen, the league got through 2.5 weeks of pretty positive news on COVID-19. It seems like the moves that the teams made, eliminating the preseason, training camps, all at the team facilities. The early returns certainly were, encouraging that the NFL had been doing the right thing, and then it seemed like maybe they got a little happy with the teams, individuals or teams got a little happy with the news, and we started seeing some spread that has potentially a big impact on the schedule and proceeding through the next few weeks of the season.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, you can have all the protocols in place, and we the NFL and the Chiefs certainly have some strict protocols in place on how to deal with this. But what you don't take into account is the human factor. Think about what happened in Tennessee. According to reports, and some of those photos are pretty indicting. The players knew that they were not supposed to get together, and yet they chose, or reportedly chose, to go practice together at a high school field. That's the human nature part of it. If the orders are coming down from higher headquarters, I'm going back to my old career here. If the orders are coming down from higher headquarters, obey them. And if you obey them and with the safety protocols in mind, you wouldn't have these issues right now. And I firmly believe that. Some of those reports right now, the Titans players walking around the team facility without wearing their mask. Well, we know the protocol specifically states wear your mask. So the human nature really comes into play here. And I know people are tired of COVID. I know we're growing numb to it. I mean, we're have more than 200,000 dead around the country. And I don't mean to sound political here, but the fact is you have more than 200,000 dead. Take it seriously. Take the protocols that are in place seriously, and you should be able to go through the season with minimum damage.
To me, Blair, what's being tested right now are the protocols in the facility, because we all talked about that the key to this season happening as scheduled was what are these guys going to do once they leave the facility? We don't know how Jordan Ta'amu contracted COVID-19. I mean, you can be safe and still contract this virus. I mean, we've obviously seen that happen. People don't know how they got it. They felt like they were being safe. So I don't want to jump to any conclusions on whether or not he made a mistake outside the facility. But now what's being tested is their policies inside the facility. And right now the Chiefs have not had another negative test. And if that's the case, then that's a success story for the way that they set up everything inside their facility. I mean, this is the reason that they had the plexiglass between the lockers. It's the reason they have the mask policy with the players. And to kind of echo off of what Herbie said, I mean, this should be an example also for the rest of us in general society as well. This was a guy that was around other Chiefs players. And so far, knock on wood, we're only, 5 days removed from his positive test, that it hasn't resulted in an outbreak. And obviously, Tennessee did not have the same sort of safety protocols in their own facility, or at least they weren't abiding by the same measures that the Chiefs have been.
If I may interject something here too, because I noticed something yesterday when I was out there on the practice field. The NFL did come down hard after what happened the past week. Roger Goodell held a conference call with all the teams on Monday, and they implemented stricter policies. And what I noticed yesterday, different from prior weeks, even during stretching, all the players, all the staffers are now wearing masks while they're going through stretching. And that's just another step. But I think they're being more reactive than proactive. I think that should have been in place from the very beginning. But hey, COVID, like Vahe said, and he made a perfect analogy there. All it is it's a running back, and it just needs that little crease. So the step that you take now to prevent the crease from happening, the NFL wants to play an entire season. I think they're doing the right steps right now, but the human factor, they can't get complacent. And Blair, you hit the nail on the head there earlier. Everybody was happy because there weren't any positive tests, but they can't get complacent. That's the key thing.
Well, let's talk about NFL options here. If if the Titans are, if it doesn't get better and other teams don't comply and games might have to be rescheduled. All right, so Goodell has put out, the memo said fines and other punishment. But what about, are we looking at the possibility of a shortened regular season, or throwing in an additional bye week later in the season, moving the playoff schedule, back, pushing it back another week, or maybe not 2, but a week? Are these viable options, do you think, for the NFL, Herb?
That's a fair question. Yeah, and that's a more than fair question. And unfortunately, I don't have the answers to that. I don't know what their plan is. I'm sure they built out, if they're the smart business that I think they are, before they even started the season, they have contingency plans well in advance. What's if this happens, what's the next course of action, et cetera, et cetera. I would like to think they have that in place, but until they hit the pause button, I don't think we'll ever know what their plan is.
Dr. Alan Sills yesterday said that everything's on the table, whether it's pausing the season, shortening the season, everything's still on the table. To me, though, to your point, Blair, I wonder if the NFL is regretting not already adding an 18th week to the season and adding an extra bye week, because right now, we take the Steelers game, for example, against the Titans. The NFL lucked out that neither one of those teams had their byes yet, so they were able to reschedule the game. Well, they both had their byes in week 7. There's nothing that says what we're experiencing right now could not happen in week 11 or 12. Then how do you make up the game? You don't have bye weeks anymore. And I just wonder if the NFL is regretting not putting in a second bye week. Blair, you and I talked yesterday. I thought maybe only the AFC should play in week 16, maybe only the NFC should play in week 17. You're not taking a full week off, but now everybody in the AFC has the same bye week, maybe in week 16, and the NFC in week 17. And I wonder if they're thinking right now, we could have given ourselves some more options to get through this had we done that.
I guess everything's on the table.
To go back to that point, Blair, about Dr. Alan Sills saying that yesterday about everything being on the table. I assume the Super Bowl is immovable in terms of its date. I don't think so. No, I don't think so. That's what I was going to add. I mean, in general, there's no way that happens. It's been seen that way. But does it have to be? I mean, we're in a year like no other. So in my mind, you can think you have to work backwards from the Super Bowl date, but I'm not sure that really holds true. I mean, I think there are circumstances that can make the Super Bowl movable.
I agree.
All other sports have had to adjust their postseason. Well, everything, the regular season and postseason schedule. I was hoping that the NFL would not have to do that, but maybe that was just being a little too optimistic. So, Okay,
Well, they had a head start. They had a head start.
Right. No, they did.
On every other sport. They got to see how every other sport did it. And to me, again, that's why they should have had a better contingency plan for the schedule. The NFL, I think, has had good protocols. They've had one outbreak. And I actually think when you look at the bigger picture, one outbreak among 32 teams, I think you've got some pretty good protocols in place. You've got less people testing positive than you do out in general society. I don't think a bubble for NFL teams was doable. But I just thought that the scheduling contingency should have been worked in when they saw what was happening, especially in a sport like baseball that was also not doing the bubble.
And just to add to that point real quick, Patrick said this kind of casually yesterday, but it does hold true. Right now, you're talking about one outbreak and a couple things here and there. That's where we are. And it really is, all right, where's it going to go from here? Are they going to be kind of scared straight, whatever protocols haven't been followed or have been just, swatted aside or in their personal lives? Or are they going to really, I guess that's the question. Are they going to be, shaken up and sort of take on what baseball did at that key point where it looked like that season was right about to collapse?
The other thing that Mahomes said yesterday was that if you didn't think this was going to happen, you had false hope. And I thought that was pretty revealing that a player expected something like this to happen at some point.
Even the National Football League, when they decided to go forward with the season and when they canceled preseason, don't forget Dr. Alan Sills during his August tour, so to speak, with local media said, "Hey, we expect a positive test because it's going to be inevitable, but we do have protocols in place to handle it." But what concerns me the most is the human nature. I think if all those reports that happened in Tennessee of the players after being told not to get together and they did it anyway, I mean, what do you do?
Well, I think it's fair to overreact now and sound the alarm and like Roger Goodell did earlier this week and come pretty strong with your condemnation of the actions of these players. It has to be taken seriously if they want to get through the season. Okay,
Blair, but what do you think that means? I'm kind of curious of your opinion as to what should the punishments be?
Well, I don't listen. Forfeiture of games, has that ever happened in NFL history? That to me would be the most drastic. Take the Titans that are 3-0, and feeling really good about their season. You're telling them they've got to forfeit this week's Buffalo game, and how fair is that to the Patriots in the same division as the Bills? They get a win because the Titans couldn't. Those are things that really have to be strongly considered. But Goodell put it out there that it's possible. So.
Yeah, I agree with you. Just because the draft pick thing is a little bit messy to me because you're potentially punishing future teams for what this current team is doing. It sort of reminds me, and this is more your area, Blair, but when the college team gets put on probation for something the past coach does, that's kind of what taking away draft picks would be for me. And so I'm more into the actual forfeiting games. That's punishing the players who are responsible for this.
Boy, that would be fascinating if it came to that. It really would be. Okay, hey, let's switch it up quickly. And Kyle Coffey says Mahomes was the most mad he's been after a win in a while. Crazy to think a win versus the Pats can mean a bad mood. Seems like he wasn't happy with their play on the offense at all. I think we agreed with that after hearing Mahomes after the game. So we're at the end of the first quarter of the NFL season for all but the Titans and the Steelers, right? They've only played 3 games. Everybody else has played 4. So my question is, and we'll start with Vahe on this: Did the Patriots provide something of a blueprint to defend the Chiefs? And I think we all agreed if Cam Newton had been behind the center on Monday night, it'd have been much more difficult. Maybe not a 16-point win. Who knows how the outcome would have fallen had Cam Newton been there? But the way the Patriots played defensively against the Chiefs, Vahe, did they show the rest of the NFL something?
I froze up, Blair. I think you asked something about the Patriots. I'm back, though. Hey, first of all, about Cam, it would have been a different game, right? We just don't know the full dynamics, and so maybe we'll see those dynamics in play later if they meet in the playoffs. As far as a blueprint, I think a book is developing on the Chiefs, right? And yet it's the ability to execute with the people you have also. And I think it's fair to say they did some things that threw the Chiefs off, but also Patrick spoke about this the other day, and Sam Mellinger wrote about it. We've all kind of addressed it in some way or another. Patrick Mahomes wasn't sharp. He made some kind of uncharacteristic mistakes, and the Patriots caused some of that, but some of that was just him being off a little bit. I think that's pretty rare, and I think you need that combination of a great game plan and him being off to have a chance to beat him, and they still won 26-10. So I think at the quarter pole, we've learned that, teams are trying to find new ways to stop him. They're going to probably get more exotic, I would think, as they go. And also, though, they don't have to have Patrick Mahomes have a great game for them to win.
All true. So, Herbie, I pulled this out just looking at the player participation rates. The Patriots used a linebacker. There was a linebacker, at least one linebacker on the field on Monday night for 13% of the plays against the Chiefs, which is to suggest they played a lot of defensive backs with their 4 linemen. And I don't remember a game, and they actually just started one linebacker. So is that what should the Chiefs have been able to do against the Patriots with that defensive alignment?
Run the football.
Absolutely.
This is something that Sam Mellinger, our esteemed colleague, he and I kept looking at each other in the press box. We're like, you got 6 defensive backs out there. Why aren't they running the football? To your earlier question, and I'll get back to this other point here, the difficulty a lot of teams are going to have trying to match what the Patriots did is, number one, they don't have Bill Belichick. And I saw a comment scroll across the screen, and he was dead correct. They don't have the defensive mastermind in charge of their scheme, and they don't have the personnel like the Patriots do. The Patriots were able to generate pressure with just 4 rushers, okay? We saw what happened to the Ravens when you try to blitz. Patrick Mahomes is going to pick you apart. If I learned anything about the Chiefs over their first quarter, they're capable of winning ugly. They won ugly in San Diego, where the Chargers tried to devise the defensive scheme against them. They won ugly against the Patriots. But going back to your other question, if you're the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs and you see 6 defensive backs on the field, they're trying to take away the pass. Run the football. Force them to put a linebacker in there because they're clearly trying to take away your biggest component of your offense.
Yeah, Herbie, you mentioned Sam Mellinger's column, and I read it before we went on the air today. It's really well done, well researched, used film study, and showed a couple of Clyde Edwards-Helaire runs that should have gone for bigger gains against the way the Patriots were lining up, but for whatever reason, it just didn't happen. Maybe Clyde didn't bounce outside, or the offensive line didn't create the crease. So I think that's the important thing, that the issue that the Chiefs need to address against good defenses. They've got to be able to establish the run against teams that are going to play that kind of coverage in the secondary against them. Hey, we had to say goodbye to Vahe Conflict, so we've got Herbie and Sam to bring us home today.
It's fascinating to me because you always hear in the National Football League teams loading up on the run, and now we're seeing the complete opposite when it comes to defending the Chiefs. They're loading up against the pass, and when conversely, when teams do load up against the run, the flip side of challenging that is to attack the pass. And so I think the beauty is you have Andy Reid. I'm sure he's watched all the cut-ups, he's watched all the tape, and if you spy on a team with 6 defensive backs out there, go after it.
Yeah, Blair, there's been a lot of talk about whether or not there's a blueprint now, and obviously Sam addressed that, but Andy Reid now knows that blueprint too, right? And so we're going to see some adjustments from the Chiefs as well. I mean, it's not like this defense, the way that they played, is going to work against this team every single week, and what we saw from the Chiefs is what we're going to see from the Chiefs. They're going to make some adjustments because of the way they were played, but you're absolutely right. I mean, they tried to run the football on Monday. They just didn't do it very well. And you've got to execute the run game better. As much as calling the plays, you've just got to execute the run plays better.
Okay, look, it's a 4-0 team, so 1 or 2 things have gone right for the Chiefs so far. I'll run down a quick list, and then I've got a question for you guys. Tyreek Hill has a touchdown reception in every game this year, and I think that defenses are trying to lock him up, and he's still getting free and getting into the end zone. Patrick Mahomes, because it's a quarter pole, easy to project, right? Just multiply his stats by 4. projects to 44 touchdowns and more than 4,500 yards passing, and no interceptions.
0 interceptions.
How about that? Chiefs have committed 2 turnovers this year. I think they could live with a half a turnover per game this season. And we talked about the pass defense earlier in the show. What I wanted to ask you guys is the contributions of the rookies, the draft class, specifically Edwards-Helaire, Willie Gay, Snead, and Mike Dana, maybe getting as nice a bump as you might expect from a draft class when the team picked last in the first round, and probably in previous years, with an exception or two, didn't get as much collectively out of its draft class this early in the season as they're getting now. Agree?
I mean, I saw a stat. I think it was after week 3 that in one of the games the Texans played this year, just to compare and contrast, they had 0 snaps from rookies the entire game. Like, their draft class gave them nothing over an entire game. So you mentioned it, Blair. I mean, the Chiefs picked last in this draft, and they also picked a couple of guys that I don't think were on a lot of teams' radars based on where they picked them. L'Jarius Sneed being one of them. You can get a starting quarterback in the 4th round. It's a pretty good draft pick.
I think with their draft picks, we're going to see one of them who was projected when the pick was made to make an impact. We're probably going to start seeing that now. Willie Gay, their 2nd-round draft pick, 0 snaps in week 1, 6 snaps in week 2, 9 in week 3, drew the start against the Patriots, and played on 25 defensive snaps. The interesting thing to me was how they continued to rotate Ben Neiman in there. Neiman also played 20 defensive snaps. But I think what's probably going to end up happening here, now that we know that Gay is a starter, so to speak, he's probably going to draw a little bit more playing time from Neiman.
Let's continue that thought on Gay, but I wanted to get in. Chris Boone says, don't forget about Tommy Townsend as for the crop of newcomers. Absolutely. And in fact, the guy set a record for average punting yards in the previous game. I didn't know that until after the game, but I forgot what it was 60 plus, I think.
60.3, I believe.
Yeah. So undrafted free agent, as punters tend to be, and he had a really nice game against New England. So absolutely, Chris. Thanks for reminding us about Tommy Townsend. Okay, Herbie, you mentioned Willie Gay and the role. I think his role expands, especially when the Chiefs are looking at opponents that like to use the back out of the backfield as a receiver. I think that's the case with the Raiders. We were pretty sure it was going to be in play with the Patriots. If teams have that ability, that's how kind of against Steve Spagnuolo's defense last year and this year, they see opportunity there. Don't you think that's a primary reason we'll see more of Willie Gay?
Oh, absolutely. And you remember before the game when I tweeted out, hey, Gay's working with the starters with the first team, and you immediately texted back. I'm giving Blair props here because he pointed it out. Yeah, you got James White back there in the backfield for the Patriots, and he's dead correct. I mean, when you've got those receiving type running backs, this is the reason why they drafted Willie Gay. I always go back to draft night when Brett Veach kept saying his ability to defend against the pass. We know what he can do against the run, but his ability to cover. He's a sideline to sideline linebacker. He's got speed. So you're absolutely correct. Josh Jacobs for the Raiders is a pretty darn good receiver out of the backfield. So it makes perfect sense to have Gay in there as well.
There's sort of a couple things at play. First of all, their linebackers last year we know did not cover well. But second of all, the defensive backs are covering really well. So those two things working together are going to make teams exploit tight end and running back matchups. And that's why you drafted this guy. I mean, that's the reason you brought him in. I think Willie Gay had maybe a little bit more of a disadvantage than other guys not playing a preseason and a training camp and all that because he's learning a new defensive system. We saw how long it took veteran NFL players to learn Steve Spagnuolo's system last year before they finally got it together. You've got a rookie now that's trying to learn that system. So I think what we see now, Herbie mentioned his snap counts, is something we probably should have anticipated before the season began. Just a gradual increase of his workload as he becomes more comfortable with what his assignments are there.
Yeah, especially with no preseason games. I think he was the one rookie that might have benefited most from having preseason games. Okay, well, let's just let's end it. Let's start winding it down on what we think will happen on Sunday with the Raiders. Been a weird season for the Vegas Raiders. They look so good in their first two games, including a victory over Drew Brees and the Saints at Allegiant Stadium. They have followed that up with losses in their last two games, and to the Patriots and the Bills. So I know that, from as is the case with all NFL teams, fans were just excited as they could be when the team wins, and now they're calling for heads to roll now that they've lost a couple of games in Vegas. So Derek Carr, of course, as we always start with him when we talk about the Raiders. He's never won at Arrowhead Stadium. He's 0-6, and has had there have been a couple of pick sixes in the last couple of games for the Chiefs against Derek Carr. He's looked good and bad at times. Hasn't thrown a pick this year. 8 touchdowns, no interceptions. I think that speaks to the short passing game, especially, as you said, Herbie, to Jacobs out of the backfield. I don't know. It's a Raiders team to come in here in a bad mood, but they could be motivated, inspired. And we saw Carr's comments after the loss to the Bills, how he was just sick of losing. But I think the Raiders can bring their A game to Arrowhead on Sunday, and it won't matter. I think the Chiefs end up winning this thing.
Yeah, I agree. There's a reason why the Chiefs have won 5 straight against the Raiders. They can extend it to 6 straight with a win on Sunday. But, this is 2 different Raiders teams from the first quarter. The first 2 games, I was actually impressed. I was like, wow, they're actually pretty good. These last 2 games, though, they've been shorthanded, and I think that's what hurt them the most. Their starting right tackle, Trent Brown, hasn't played since suffering a calf injury, I believe, in week 1. Ruggs, the guy that they were really depending on to open up the downfield passing game, hamstring injury in week 2 and hasn't played. So those injuries coincide with some of these losses here, but I don't think they have enough right now, especially if Ruggs, a hamstring injury can linger. I don't think if he's not playing, there's no way in the world they can hang with the Chiefs.
Yeah, the matchup I'm most looking forward to is the Chiefs safeties against Carr. Carr has not played well against the Chiefs. And last year, you mentioned they had the pick 6. That was Juan Thornhill. But Tyrann Mathieu had an interception at Arrowhead that he just completely read Derek Carr's tendencies on film. And I'm almost wondering now if there's a lot of stuff going through Derek Carr's head as he's approaching this game. He's never won at Arrowhead, doesn't play well against this team, and now he's going against a guy that looked to have him figured out a little bit last year. I just think there's a lot of play and most of it's going against the Raiders. I know the Chiefs didn't play their best against the Patriots, but I think it's at least a 2-touchdown game on Sunday.
Okay, and we can save this for the next time that the rematch in Vegas. But I've got to think this is it for Derek Carr. If he doesn't get it done this season, they got to make a change, and maybe it happens sooner rather than later. But I think it's just one playoff season with him at the as a starting quarterback for, was it 5 or 6 years now? It's really time for Derek Carr to start winning some games for the Raiders. All right, guys, that's going to do it. Thanks so much for joining us, for your questions and comments to Herbie and Sam McDowell, Vahe Gregorian, and Sam Ellinger. We missed you today. We'll get you next time. Beth Welsh, thanks for producing today, and we will talk to you again after Sunday's game, which kicks off at noon. Yes, a noon kickoff on Sunday. So look for us late afternoon on Sunday on SportsBeat Live. Have a good rest of your morning.